Welcome back to Augmented Voices, everyone. Today we're taking a deep dive into some really fascinating areas where AI is making a big splash. And it's not just in the tech world. We're talking about how this technology is starting to touch everything from landing your dream job to the art hanging on your walls, and even, believe it or not, the way your burger gets flipped.
You hit the nail on the head. We've got a really interesting mix of stories to unpack today, pulled from some pretty recent headlines. We'll be looking at a Columbia University student's unusual approach to job interviews, Christie's diving headfirst into the AI art world with their first ever auction dedicated to it, McDonald's rolling out virtual managers powered by AI, and a whole wave of AI legislation sweeping across the U.S. So yeah, quite a bit to cover. Our goal, as always, is to help you make sense of it all. What's really important here? What does it mean for us moving forward? Are you ready to get into it?
I am, absolutely. Let's jump right in with this story about Roy Lee, a student at Columbia, and his creation, Interview Coder. Now, anyone who's ever had to go through the gauntlet of technical interviews, especially at those big tech companies, knows how ridiculously tough they can be.
Tough might be putting it mildly. We're talking hours upon hours of intense problem solving, needing to demonstrate this deep understanding of algorithms and data structures. It can feel like an insanely high bar to clear, especially for someone just starting out in their career. And that seems to be where Roy Lee's story gets interesting, right? Like, how did he choose to tackle this massive challenge?
Yeah, exactly. He said he spent something like 600 hours preparing for these interviews and kind of came away feeling like, what they were testing didn't necessarily translate to the actual skills you need to do the job day to day as a software engineer. So we created this thing called Interview Coder. And from what I gather, it basically uses ChatGPT to, solve the coding problems they throw at you during these interviews just by snapping a photo of the question.
It's like he found this clever workaround, or at least that's how it seems. He's basically using the power of a large language model, which is like a super smart AI trained on tons of data, to get around the traditional way they assess candidates. And get this, it apparently worked. He reportedly got offers from some major companies, Amazon, Meta, TikTok, you name it. It's kind of a wild story of, you could say, out-of-the-box thinking, maybe?
It is, for sure. But of course, there's a twist. He decided to go public with his method, shared it all on YouTube, even showed footage of his Amazon interview. And as you might expect, that created some waves. He got reported to Columbia, ended up facing a disciplinary hearing, and yeah, I don't think Amazon was too thrilled about it either. What really jumps out at you about all of this?
Well, for anyone watching, especially those involved in hiring, this whole situation makes you step back and ask, what are these technical interviews really measuring? If someone can use AI to sail through them, does that mean the whole process is flawed? It also raises this bigger question about how we define and evaluate skills in this age where AI can do increasingly complex things we used to think only humans could do.
That's such a good point. And, Lee's response to all of this is pretty bold, too. He turned down that Amazon offer, plans to leave Columbia, and now he wants to make Interview Coder a paid subscription service.
Yeah.
He seems to genuinely believe that these large language models, remember, those are AI systems trained on massive amounts of text data, are going to completely change the game for these tech jobs, making those old school interviews obsolete. I mean, talk about conviction, right?
Right. It's definitely a disruptive perspective, to say the least. And thinking bigger picture, it kind of suggests this future where being able to effectively use these AI tools might become just as important, if not more important, than having traditional technical skills. It's like, are schools and companies keeping up with how quickly things are changing?
It really makes you wonder about the future of work, doesn't it? What one person sees as a brilliant hack, someone else sees as, cheating the system. But let's shift gears completely now. Let's talk art. Christie's, the big auction house, just held their first ever auction dedicated entirely to AI-generated art. They called it Augmented Intelligence.
This was a big deal, wasn't it? I mean, there was quite a bit of controversy leading up to it, people questioning if it was even right to do this, but the auction actually blew past expectations, raked in over $728,000. It's kind of amazing considering all the debate surrounding AI art and what it even means to call it art, right?
Absolutely. And a big part of that debate was about copyright. There's this open letter from a bunch of people arguing that these AI models are trained on huge amounts of copyrighted material without proper permission. It raised questions about whether it's even legal or ethical to sell art created using those models. How did Christie's respond to those concerns?
Well, they basically backed the artists. Christie's emphasized that these artists have all kinds of creative practices, and they're using AI as just another tool in their arsenal, a way to expand their vision, not just copy stuff. They made the point that the artists are still the ones shaping and guiding what the AI creates.
Interesting. So the top-selling piece was by this artist, Rifik Anadol, called Machine Hallucinations ISS Dreams A. It sold for a whopping $277,200. And get this, Anadol is actually planning on opening an entire museum dedicated to AI art called Dataland. This is like AI art crashing into the mainstream, right?
Right.
What do you think that kind of price tag tells us?
Well, if you're watching market trends, it definitely suggests that there's a growing acceptance of AI-generated art, at least among certain collectors.
Hmm.
It's interesting, though, some pieces didn't sell, so there's definitely some selectivity going on. But the success of Anadol and other artists like Holly Herndon and Matt Dryhurst, even pioneers like Charles Surrey and Harold Cohen, who were doing this kind of generative art way back when, it shows there's a real demand. And what's even more interesting, maybe, is who's buying it.
Oh, yeah. Tell me about that.
Well, a lot of the buyers were new to Christie's, hadn't bought from them before, and almost half were millennials or Gen Z, which is kind of fascinating. It seems like AI art is drawing in this whole new generation of art collectors, which could shake things up for established artists and galleries.
Yeah. What kind of implications does that have for them? That's a really good question. It could mean that artistic tastes are changing, that people are starting to value different kinds of art. And even though those copyright issues are still a big question mark, the fact that interest in AI art is growing, even surpassing NFTs, according to some reports, it kind of feels like AI art is here to stay. It's going to keep evolving, keep pushing boundaries, and maybe even create whole new opportunities for both artists and collectors.
I think so, yeah. It's definitely an area to keep watching.
Definitely. And speaking of things that are evolving, let's move from, well, maybe the highbrow world of art to something a little more everyday. Fast food, McDonald's is making a big move towards AI-powered virtual managers. What's that all about?
This is a really interesting example of how AI is being used to make businesses more efficient, especially huge global ones like McDonald's. They're basically giving their tech a major upgrade. They've partnered with Google Cloud to use AI for things like predictive maintenance knowing when a fryer or that infamous ice cream machine is about to break down before it actually happens. And they're even using AI-powered cameras to make sure orders are accurate. For anyone out there, this is a sign of how AI is being used to prevent problems before they even happen.
Well, I think a lot of people would be happy about fewer ice cream machine meltdowns.
Yeah.
But the big news here is this generative AI virtual manager. It sounds like this AI is going to be doing a lot, scheduling shifts, managing inventory, making sure orders are right, even giving advice to the human employees. Is this a big deal or is it just hype?
I think it's potentially a pretty big shift for the fast food industry. And it's not just McDonald's either. Pizza Hut, Taco Bell, they're all experimenting with AI-driven management tools. Taco Bell has something called Bite by Yum. What this tells us is that the whole industry is looking to AI to become more efficient and streamline things.
And even though McDonald's says this isn't about cutting jobs, it's about making things more efficient, you have to wonder what it means for the human managers in the long run.
Yeah, absolutely. It could mean that their jobs change, that they focus less on routine tasks and more on things like solving complex problems, coaching employees, and interacting with customers. It's a good example of how AI isn't just changing things on the customer side of businesses, but also how those businesses operate behind the scenes.
From virtual managers to the very real world of laws and regulations, let's talk about the surge in AI legislation we're seeing in the U.S. right now. Policymakers seem to be scrambling to keep up with all these advancements in AI, right?
It's pretty remarkable. Just in the beginning of 2025, we've already seen 781 AI-related bills introduced. It really shows how seriously lawmakers are taking this, how urgent they think it is to figure out how to govern AI, especially since there aren't any federal laws yet.
Right. It seems like most of the action is happening at the state level. Maryland is focusing on high-risk AI systems, like those used in healthcare or finance. Texas has this broad, responsible AI Governance Act. And Massachusetts wants companies to disclose if they're using AI to review health insurance claims. It feels very piecemeal, doesn't it? What are the potential downsides of having all these different state laws?
Yeah, that's a real concern. If you're a company that does business in multiple states, all these different laws could be a nightmare to navigate. Without clear national guidelines, it could stifle innovation and make it harder for companies to grow. The EU has a very different approach with their AI Act, which is much more comprehensive.
And from what we've heard, the Trump administration seems to be taking a more hands-off approach, at least for now. They're focused on promoting AI development and keeping the U.S. competitive, not so much on heavy regulation. What do you think that means for the future of AI governance in the U.S.?
Well, it suggests that we're likely going to see more of this state-by-state approach, which, as we said, could create a very complex and confusing landscape for businesses.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, it's clear that AI isn't some distant future thing anymore. It's already woven into so many parts of our lives. It's shaking things up in the job market, creating new and exciting forms of art, changing how businesses work, and prompting lawmakers to scramble for solutions. It's all happening so
That
fast.
it's impacting everyone, from individuals trying to land that next job to entire industries grappling with how to adapt.
So as you think about all these changes, here's something to consider. What are the most important conversations we need to be having right now about how we integrate AI into society in a way that benefits all of us? And what role do you play in shaping those conversations? It's something we all need to be thinking about.